I want you to take a deep breath with me right now, because what I'm about to share with you might completely shift how you see your painful childhood. It might change how you understand your family, and it will definitely transform how you view your spiritual journey. You see, I've spent years wondering why some of the most spiritually gifted souls get placed into the most dysfunctional families. Why do those who can see through illusions, who feel everything so deeply, who carry ancient wisdom in their hearts, end up being the black sheep, the misunderstood ones, the ones who get labeled as too sensitive, too different, too much? I used to think it was cruel. I used to think it was unfair. But then I discovered profound insights about the psyche, about spiritual development, and about why our souls choose the exact experiences they need for transformation. And everything clicked. Your toxic family wasn't a mistake. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't God abandoning you. It was actually the opposite. It was divine design. Let me explain what I mean. Every soul comes into this world with potential for individuation. That's the process of becoming your truest, most whole self. But here's what most people don't understand. That process doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in chaos. It doesn't unfold in safety. It emerges from challenge. When I look at my own journey, I can see this pattern so clearly. I was born into a family that felt more like a battlefield than a sanctuary. Love was conditional. Emotions were weapons. Truth was punished. And for the longest time, I thought I was cursed. But I learned something revolutionary. Those who are meant to raise the collective consciousness, those who carry the light for others, must first learn to find that light in darkness. They must develop spiritual immunity in the very environment that seems designed to break them. Think about it. When you grow up in a toxic family system, what happens to you? You're forced to look beyond human love for validation. You're pushed to connect with something higher, something more reliable than conditional approval. You develop an inner compass because the outer world is too chaotic to trust. This is why I believe God sent you into that specific family. Not to destroy you, but to forge you. Not to diminish your light, but to teach you how to generate it from within. Now, I will speak extensively about the shadow, the unconscious, wounded parts of the psyche that must be brought into the light for true healing to occur. And I realized that toxic families are shadow factories. They're environments where unconscious patterns, generational trauma, and dysfunctional dynamics create the perfect storm for spiritual awakening. You weren't born into that chaos by accident. You were placed there because your soul was strong enough to alchemize pain into wisdom. You were chosen to break cycles that had been running in your lineage for generations. I remember the first time I truly understood this. I was sitting in therapy crying about how unfair my childhood had been when my therapist said something that stopped me cold. She said, "What if your family gave you exactly what your soul needed to become who you're meant to be?" At first, I was angry. How could abuse be what my soul needed? How could neglect be part of a divine plan? But as I sat with this question, something shifted. I began to see that every toxic interaction had forced me to develop strength I wouldn't have needed otherwise. Every moment of being misunderstood had pushed me deeper into my own truth. Every experience of conditional love had taught me to find unconditional connection with the divine. This is what I meant when I talked about the wounded healer archetype. Those who experience the deepest wounds often become the most powerful healers, not despite their pain, but because of how they've transformed it. Let me share something personal with you. Growing up, I was always the one who questioned things, the one who felt too much, the one who couldn't just go along with family dysfunction. And because of this, I became the target, the scapegoat, the problem child. But Jung taught me that the scapegoat in a toxic family system is usually the most spiritually advanced person in the room. They're the one who refuses to participate in the illusion. They're the one whose very presence threatens the family's comfortable lies. You see, toxic families operate on unspoken rules. Don't talk about what's really happening. Don't feel what you're actually feeling. Don't be who you really are. And when someone comes along who naturally breaks these rules, who embodies authenticity in a system built on pretense, they become the identified problem. But here's the spiritual plot twist that helped me to understand. Being the problem in a dysfunctional system means you're actually the solution. You're the one carrying the potential for healing. You're the one who said, "This dysfunction ends with me." I think about this every time I meet someone who's struggling with family trauma. They always ask the same questions. Why me? Why was I born into this? What did I do to deserve this? And I want to tell them what I wish someone had told me years ago. You weren't sent into that family to suffer endlessly. You were sent there to break free and show others the way out. You weren't placed in dysfunction to become dysfunction. You were placed there to transform it. I believe that the family is the primary environment that shapes the soul. And while healthy families provide security and love, toxic families provide something different but equally valuable for certain souls. They provide contrast, they provide pressure, they provide the exact conditions needed to develop spiritual strength. Think about how diamonds are formed. They don't emerge from gentle environments. They're created under intense pressure in the deepest, darkest parts of the earth. Your soul is like that diamond. The pressure of your toxic family wasn't meant to crush you. It was meant to compress all that spiritual carbon in your being into something unbreakable and brilliant. This doesn't mean I'm glorifying abuse or suggesting that toxic behavior is acceptable. What I'm saying is that your soul, in its infinite wisdom, chose an environment that would catalyze your spiritual development in ways that comfort never could. When I really absorbed this truth, everything about my family experience shifted. I stopped seeing myself as a victim and started recognizing myself as a spiritual warrior. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come and started appreciating the strength that adversity had given me. I'm going to talk about something called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to bridge conscious and unconscious material to create new awareness. And I believe that those of us who grew up in toxic families develop this transcendent function early and powerfully. We have to. It's survival. We learn to see beyond surface presentations. We develop intuition because we can't trust words. We become sensitive to energy because we need to read rooms for safety. We connect with the divine because human love feels too unreliable. All of these skills that we developed in toxic families, they're not just survival mechanisms, they're spiritual gifts. They're the very abilities that make us powerful healers, teachers, and guides for others. I want to pause here and speak directly to anyone listening who's still in the thick of family dysfunction. If you're still living with people who don't understand you, who criticize your sensitivity, who try to dim your light, I want you to know something. Your current environment doesn't define your worth or your future. Jung taught that individuation, becoming who you really are, often requires separating from the collective, even if that collective is your family. This separation isn't about hatred or revenge. It's about honoring the person you're meant to become. I remember the day I finally set boundaries with my family. It was terrifying. I had been programmed to believe that family comes first no matter what, but I realized that staying in toxic dynamics wasn't serving anyone. It wasn't helping them grow, and it was definitely stunting my own development. Setting those boundaries felt like betrayal at first, but I would say it was actually loyalty. Loyalty to my authentic self. Loyalty to my spiritual path, loyalty to the healing that wanted to happen through me. And here's what I discovered. When I stopped participating in dysfunction, when I stopped enabling unhealthy patterns, when I refused to carry shame that wasn't mine, something beautiful happened. I became free to access my gifts fully. The empathy that had been overwhelmed by family chaos became a healing force. The sensitivity that had been criticized became spiritual discernment. The intuition that had been dismissed became inner guidance. All those traits that made me the odd one out in my family became the very qualities that allowed me to help others. This is what I meant by the wounded healer. The person who has experienced the deepest psychological and spiritual challenges often develops the greatest capacity to guide others through similar darkness. But let me be clear about something. This transformation doesn't happen automatically. Just because you experience family trauma doesn't mean you'll automatically become enlightened. The alchemy happens when you consciously choose to transform your pain into purpose. I've emphasized that individuation is an active process. It requires conscious participation. It demands that you do the inner work to integrate your experiences rather than just surviving them. For me, this work looked like therapy, meditation, studying psychology and spirituality, and most importantly, learning to reparent myself. I had to give myself the unconditional love I never received. I had to validate my own experiences when no one else would. I had to become my own safe space. And as I did this work, something miraculous happened. I stopped needing my family to change. I stopped waiting for them to acknowledge the damage they'd caused. I stopped hoping they would finally see and appreciate who I really was. Instead, I found something even more powerful. I found an unshakable connection to my own worth. I discovered that my value didn't depend on their approval. My peace didn't require their understanding. My light didn't need their permission to shine. This is the gift that toxic families give to spiritually advanced souls. They force you to find your source of love, validation, and security within yourself and in your connection to the divine. They push you to develop what Jung called a direct relationship with the unconscious, with the deeper wisdom that lives beyond the ego. When you can no longer rely on external validation, you're forced to develop internal compass. When human love feels conditional and unreliable, you're pushed to find unconditional love in your relationship with the divine. When your family environment is chaotic, you learn to generate your own peace. These aren't consolation prizes, these are superpowers. I think about all the people I've met over the years who had perfectly loving, supportive families. And while I don't wish trauma on anyone, I notice something about many of these individuals. They often struggle more with life's inevitable challenges because they haven't developed the inner resilience that comes from surviving family dysfunction. They haven't learned to self-soothe because they've always had external soothing. They haven't developed strong boundaries because they've never needed them. They haven't cultivated a direct relationship with the divine because human love has felt sufficient. Again, I'm not saying trauma is better than love. I'm saying that for certain souls who came here to be healers, teachers, and consciousness shifters, the path often leads through the valley of family dysfunction. Jung called this the hero's journey. The hero must leave the familiar world, face challenges and dragons, and return transformed with gifts for the community. Your toxic family was your departure from the ordinary world. Your healing journey is your quest, and your transformed presence in the world is your gift to the collective. But here's something crucial that I understood. The hero's journey isn't a one-time event. It's a cyclical process. You'll face new challenges, deeper layers of healing, and greater levels of spiritual development throughout your life. The difference is that once you understand why you were placed in your specific family system, once you grasp the spiritual purpose behind your early challenges, you stop seeing obstacles as evidence of divine abandonment. Instead, you recognize them as invitations to grow. Every time someone doesn't understand you, you get stronger in your self-knowing. Every time you're criticized for being too sensitive, you deepen your appreciation for your emotional gifts. Every time you're called to set a boundary, you honor the sovereignty you developed through family adversity. This is what I call spiritual immunity. It's the ability to maintain your frequency regardless of external circumstances. It's the capacity to stay connected to your truth even when others are projecting their shadows onto you. Projection is one of the primary ways unconscious material gets expressed. When family members call you selfish, dramatic, or difficult, they're often projecting their own disowned qualities onto you. When they shame your sensitivity or dismiss your spiritual insights, they're revealing their own disconnection from these aspects of themselves. Understanding this dynamic has been life-changing for me. When someone tries to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries, I recognize their projection. When family members criticize my spiritual path, I understand their fear of looking at their own spiritual emptiness. This doesn't make their behavior acceptable, but it does free me from taking it personally. Their reaction to my growth is about their relationship with their own potential for growth. Their discomfort with my healing reflects their avoidance of their own healing. I think that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to understanding ourselves. But I'd add this: everything that threatens others about us often reveals what they fear most about themselves. Your light threatens people who are comfortable in darkness. Your authenticity challenges people who are invested in facades. Your spiritual development confronts people who are avoiding their own souls. This is why the spiritual path can feel lonely, especially when you're the first in your family to wake up. You're no longer willing to play the unconscious games. You refuse to participate in toxic dynamics. You insist on emotional honesty in relationships built on emotional deception. But I will remind that loneliness and aloneness are different experiences. Loneliness is the pain of disconnection. Aloneness is the peace of self-connection. When you develop a strong relationship with your inner world, with your spiritual source, you can be alone without being lonely. This is another gift that toxic families give. They teach you to be comfortable with solitude because external relationships feel unpredictable. They push you to develop rich inner lives because outer lives feel chaotic. And here's something beautiful that happens when you fully embrace this gift. You become capable of authentic intimacy in ways that people from healthy families sometimes struggle with. Because you've learned to love yourself unconditionally, you can love others without need or expectation. Because you've developed emotional sovereignty, you can be in relationship without losing yourself. The intimacy that emerges from this foundation is different from codependent bonding or trauma bonding. It's conscious love, it's chosen connection, it's two whole people coming together to share their light rather than two wounded people trying to complete each other. Jung believed that the goal of individuation is not just personal wholeness, but the ability to contribute to collective healing. And I see this playing out in my own life and in the lives of others who've transformed family trauma into spiritual gifts. We become the therapists, the coaches, the healers, the teachers. We write the books, create the art, and lead the movements that help others navigate their own darkness. We hold space for people in ways that those who haven't experienced deep pain often cannot. This is what I meant when I said that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you really are. For those of us who grew up in toxic families, becoming who we really are requires separating from who we were told we should be. It means honoring our sensitivity in families that called it weakness. It means trusting our intuition in environments that dismissed it as imagination. It means speaking our truth in systems that punished authenticity. Every time you choose your authentic self over family approval, you're participating in what I call the transcendent function. You're bridging the gap between who you were conditioned to be and who you really are. This process isn't comfortable. I never promised it would be. I said that individuation requires suffering because growth always involves the death of old identities. But I also promised that this suffering is meaningful when it leads to greater consciousness. And this is what I want you to understand. If you're struggling with family relationships right now, your discomfort isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're doing something necessary. When you outgrow your family's emotional maturity level, tension is inevitable. When you develop spiritual insights that they're not ready to hear, conflict will arise. When you set boundaries in a system that's never had them, resistance is guaranteed. But I would say this tension is actually the birth canal of your authentic self. The pressure you feel is the pressure of your soul trying to emerge from the shell of family conditioning. I remember reading some words about how the fish doesn't know it's in water until it's taken out. Your family system was your water. You didn't know how toxic it was until you started breathing different air. And once you start breathing that air of authenticity, of spiritual connection, of emotional health, you can never go back to the old suffocation. You can love your family from a distance. You can wish them well without wishing to be with them. You can honor what they gave you while refusing what they're still trying to give you. This is spiritual maturity. This is what I call the realization of the self with a capital S. It's the recognition that you are more than your family role, more than your childhood wounds, more than the identity they assign to you. You are a soul with a mission. You are consciousness having a human experience. You are light that chose to incarnate in darkness so that darkness could be transformed. Your toxic family wasn't your enemy. They were your unconscious collaborators in your spiritual development. They provided the resistance you needed to develop spiritual muscle. They created the chaos that forced you to find divine order within yourself. And now that you understand this, now that you can see the bigger picture, you have a choice. You can remain bitter about what you didn't receive, or you can become grateful for what you did develop. You can stay stuck in victim consciousness, or you can step into victor consciousness. What you resist persists, but what you accept transforms. When you accept that your family experience was exactly what your soul needed for its evolution, something shifts. The resentment dissolves. The need for apologies disappears. The hope for change releases. In its place, you find something infinitely more valuable. You find peace with your path. You find gratitude for your gifts. You find excitement about your purpose. Because here's the truth that I understood, and I want you to understand. You weren't sent into that toxic family to become another casualty. You were sent there to become a catalyst. You're not meant to perpetuate the dysfunction. You're meant to transform it. Every time you choose love over fear, you're healing your lineage. Every time you set a healthy boundary, you're teaching your family system a new way of being. Every time you refuse to participate in toxic patterns, you're creating space for healthier ones to emerge. You are the pattern interrupt in your family's unconscious programming. You are the light bearer in generational darkness. You are the hope that your ancestors dreamed of but couldn't access themselves. This is why God sent you into that toxic family, not to suffer endlessly, but to suffer consciously and transform that suffering into wisdom, not to become broken, but to become the healing that your lineage has been waiting for. And with all this profound insights into the human psyche, would remind you that this journey from wound to wisdom, from victim to victor, from broken to breakthrough, is the most sacred journey any soul can take. You are not a mistake. You are not an accident. You are not too much or not enough. You are exactly who your family needed to interrupt their unconscious patterns, and you are exactly who the world needs to guide others from darkness into light. Your toxic family was your spiritual boot camp, and now you're ready for your mission.